For example, one upgrade I see that generally brings like good value is building a garage. Especially if you don't have a garage or if you've only got a single attached or a small garage or something like that. Uh, Garage is just, if you add a double detached in the back, you're going to get a lot of the value that it costs you to build that back because buyers want that. They're desirable.
This is the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. When it comes to buying, refinancing, or investing in real estate, one key number that can make or break the deal is the appraisal. But how exactly do appraisers come up with that number, and what can you do, if anything, to influence it? Today I'm joined by Jordan Vanjoff, a professional appraiser with Riverside Appraisals, to walk us through what really goes into the appraisal. Jordan, welcome to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast.
Thanks, Ron.
How does someone get into being an appraiser? First off, Jordan, is it something that when you're in kindergarten, you say, I know I'm going to be an appraiser one day, or how do you get into the industry?
Yeah, it's a pretty common grade 1 answer, just real estate appraiser, fireman, policeman, real estate appraiser. It's a top 3 probably, I'd say. No, it's kind of a niche industry, I guess. Kind of more for people with a financial background. And honestly, it's kind of like a word of mouth, who you know, because a lot of people don't even know of it, I guess. You might deal with an appraiser once or twice in your life. Yeah, like I have a family member that's a real estate appraiser, and we've got some family friends, so we kind of knew what the job entailed and the education you need. And I have a finance degree from Edwards School of Business, and then took some additional classes and got my postgraduate certificate in valuation from UBC, and then you get a accreditation from the Appraisal Institute of Canada. So it's a decent amount of education you got to get.
And then let's just tie right into that, Jordan. What exactly is an appraisal, and how is it different from a market evaluation that a realtor would provide?
Yeah, so I guess the major difference is an appraisal is like a legal opinion. So an appraisal is a professional assessment of a property's value completed by a licensed appraiser. And a CMA is done by generally a realtor for selling purposes. Whereas an appraisal could be done for a lot of purposes. It could be done to list or sell, or, during the sale process. It could also be done for tax purposes, investment purposes, estate purposes, property tax appeals. And it's more of it's legally binding, and I guess we're licensed and insured. Whereas a real estate agent, it's, they can do a great valuation. They just have less formal education, I guess. A lot of realtors are really good at figuring out values for homes. That's what they do every day. But yeah, ours is, I guess, just a little bit more. Yeah, there's more certified. Yeah, a little bit more education. And then there's a cost, right? We charge for appraisals, and a realtor is generally going to give you your CMA for free as he's trying to get you to sell or buy a house.
Right, incentive to kind of do business with them. So when you go to someone's property to do a residential appraisal, what are you looking for when you visit a property? What's entailed in that visit?
So I guess it's hard to say because you kind of look at everything to do with the property, but so when we go and we walk through each room, and we're going to take notes and pictures and ask you a bit about your house, saying it is a residential property, I guess. But, we're looking at what it's made of, what the foundation is, the size of the house. We'll measure your house, see how big it is. We're going to do room counts and see how many bedrooms and bathrooms you have. Usually we don't do this at the site, but we're going to look at your lot size. We find that through, land titles information, and see how big your lot is compared to other properties. Then we're going to look at physical characteristics like the condition of your flooring, your kitchen, your paint, kind of whether it's been upgraded or not. We're going to look for signs of damage. So if you've got any water damage or like pests or structural issues like a foundation crack or signs of wear and tear, because that all does impact the appraisal. And then the quality of material and finishes, we can tell if it's, a guy who doesn't really know what he's doing, and he installed the flooring and there's a bunch of spaces between the laminate, and it's pulling apart, or you can tell if it's been professionally completed and everything looks kind of just done really well. And then we look at home improvements. So if you've like upgraded your kitchen or your bathrooms, new flooring, new windows, any additions. So if you've made an addition to your home and kind of what year that's been built. And then energy efficiency stuff. So if you've got solar, kind of high efficient furnace, if you're using in-floor heat from a boiler, or all those types of features. And then we're also looking at your neighborhood. So, what neighborhood is it? What street is it? Is it a nice crescent or a bay? Are you backing a park? Are you backing a walking trail? Are you backing something like an industrial car park or something, or, something that'd be a deterrent for some buyers? And then your proximity to kind of schools and shopping, and taking all that into account as well. And then also like zoning, but that's kind of more after the fact than when I'm at the house. But, we're going to look at zoning and stuff like that.
And then once we have all of this information, Jordan, how are you coming up with the valuation? Does it come down to a lot of comparing what's sold on the market to what we can kind of see compares to that property exactly? Where do the values come in for the appraisal?
Yeah, so appraisals there's three approaches to value. So there's the income approach, the cost approach, and the direct comparison approach. And generally for residential properties, they're only going to use the cost approach and the direct comparison approach. And so the cost approach is generally like, how much would it take to rebuild this property? How much money would it cost? And to do, the garage and the landscaping and everything. And then also depreciating those items. So if they're all 20 years old, that cost depreciating it plus adding in the land value. And we'd look for comparables for land value, kind of same size, same characteristics, if you're backing a park or not. And adding those together, and that gives you your cost approach. Cost approach isn't really a great approach to value. It's generally completed on residential appraisals, but not usually given a ton of weight, just because it's tough to estimate depreciation. Let's say you've got a 20-year-old house, but maybe you've done renovations 5 years ago for certain aspects and 10 years ago for other aspects. So it's kind of, there's not a straight line depreciation that really applies, and depreciation can come in other forms too, like if you're very rural, let's say you're 2.5 hours away and you're an hour away from any major center. Well, it might cost a lot to build there, but that doesn't mean there's a lot of value there because there's not a lot of buyers for that property. So that's like a type of external depreciation. The direct comparison approach is the one we most often use for residential appraisals, and that's taking other sales. You're trying to take recent sales, and then you're adjusting them for differences. So if one's got a bigger lot size, one's got more garages, one's got superior kitchen or bathrooms or stuff like that, you're making adjustments. And the adjustments are based on financial techniques like paired sale analysis, group paired sale analysis. There's a bunch of different techniques we go through. And so once we've kind of found the comparables for your property, so let's say we're looking at your Ron house, and I don't know what neighborhood you're in, but let's say West College Park or something. We're going to look at for other sales of similar size houses in West College Park and probably East College Park because it's very similar, and maybe a couple other neighborhoods that are also similar, 60s houses. And then we're going to try find ones that are similar renovation to yours, similar upgrades, similar size, similar garage. And then for the differences that are in there, we're going to adjust for them. And we're probably going to bracket your property with some a little bit bigger and some a little bit smaller and some a little nicer and some that aren't as nice. And then adjusting those should kind of give you a range of adjusted values for the direct comparison approach. And the appraiser then generally picks kind of the one that makes the most sense, and they can put weight on one or more of those. Generally, you pick the one with the least adjustments that's the most similar. So if your house next door is the exact same thing and with a lot of the similar features, that's probably the one you want to do because, it's most likely going to sell near that one. But that's not usually the case. So the appraiser is going to use this kind of opinion and analysis to determine which one's kind of the best and which value to, because it's always an opinion, right? You ask 3 different appraisers, they're all going to have different opinions, but it should generally be within a pretty close range, and that's tied to comparables and then the techniques they use to adjust. So.
Yes, it is interesting to kind of have those different factors that you'll pull on to adjust value, whether it be the garage. And is that stuff kind of built into a spreadsheet, Jordan, or do you folks rely on things like AI? Do you have a tool that kind of helps you judge these things, or does it kind of go into the craftsmanship of being a good appraiser to kind of compare those things and say, I can see why this would add this value to this property, and kind of come up with those numbers?
Yeah, it's mostly research and spreadsheets currently. There's no real, like, there are some programs, and they're getting there. It kind of depends on the market size. So for something like Toronto, where there's a ton of data, you're going to have better programs that can do things like that, adjustments. You'll just have more data and more similar properties. But in Saskatchewan, generally, we're looking at other sales. And so for paired sales analysis, you're going to try and find two properties, one without a feature and one with it, that are similar in most every other way. So that doesn't happen a lot, but generally I can find like a 60s house that's 1,000 square feet, one with a garage and one without, and you can derive an adjustment for what a garage adds. And so you kind of have to keep a book and a spreadsheet of, paired sale analysis and people that add features. They sell a property and then someone goes in and renovates it. And then they sell it again. You can kind of see what that renovation did and how much value that added. So it's more of a spreadsheet thing. There's not a lot of AI for adjustments yet. I'm sure that's kind of coming, but yeah, we're not quite there yet.
And it's a good thing for us as we continue to just rely on good old human beings for some of this stuff. Let's shift gears a little bit. And I think this is something that, whether it be a real estate investor who is really keen on getting the refinance value out of a rental that they were working on, or potentially someone who's done some renovations to a home and is now looking to capitalize on that added value. If someone wants the best appraisal possible, maybe they're refinancing, trying to sell, what can they do to help support a strong valuation, Jordan?
Yeah, I guess they can only do so much, but I'd say like providing as much information as possible to the appraiser helps. So like I like it when a homeowner has a list of their upgrades that they've made in the past few years, and they've got their quotes attached to them and what they paid for them. And then a list of features for the property doesn't hurt. We go through houses every day, so it's not very often we miss a feature, but it has happened. So if you've got a kind of a list of the features of your house that you want to make sure that I see, that's great too. They're welcome to provide like sold and active comparables that I think are similar to their property. That's part of our job, to investigate those and, look for those ourselves, but we'll never turn down any information. We'll consider it, whether or not it goes into the appraisal report or not. I've seen homeowners give us properties that are active listings that are much, much nicer, and try to think that the value can be derived from that, but that's generally not the case. And then just generally like keeping the house tidy. It doesn't necessarily increase your value to have like a clean house, but it helps me do my job. Like I need to see the condition of the floor, and if it's covered in clothes and really dirty, it's hard to even see what shape the flooring's in. If rooms are full of boxes and like inaccessible, I can't really tell the condition of all of the walls and the windows. And that's difficult. Like I've been in hoarding houses, and it's hard to do a valuation of a hoarding house because you can't really see the condition of the property. Like there's just stuff everywhere, and you can't move it all to do it or anything either. So keeping it tidy helps do the job, and it's not really going to increase your value if your house is perfectly tidy, but it just does kind of help you with your appeal. It shows better. Just kind of like if you were a buyer looking at a house to buy, if you go in, it's really dirty and there's stuff on the floor, it just doesn't give a good showing, or doesn't feel great. And then one thing that happens a lot, I guess, is like finishing projects before the appraisal. Sometimes people will refinance because they want to do something like do their flooring throughout the house, but they'll have it all ripped out already. And then I come in, I'm supposed to value it, but you don't have any flooring on your main floor. And so it's better to like leave your old flooring in, wait for me to do my appraisal, than to have it like half ripped out throughout the house, or you've got a room half painted. It's better to just have the old paint, or have it completed than be kind of half done. Half done projects are kind of a tough one for us.
There's always that spurt of energy you get when you decide to take on a home renovation. And so that's likely where all the flooring gets torn up, and then, oh, wait, let's, maybe backtrack a little bit here. And I love your kind of point there about what you can do to get the valuation that you're hoping for. If you are someone who is, let's say, renovating a home, if you could probably list out those different things that they've done, and they also have some properties that they're working with their realtor that they could also send along, to the appraiser. I'm sure that also helps you folks out too, because you can either then, refute what the refinancer is, putting forward and saying these aren't good comparables because of XXX, or say, that's great. This really helps me do my job and kind of get those things lined up.
Real estate investing does not have to be a full-time job. Randall, Hoeber, and Boys Group Realty provide complete property management services in Yorkton and surrounding areas, allowing investors to enjoy passive income without the headaches of day-to-day management. From finding tenants to handling maintenance and rent collection. Whether you own a property or just getting started in the market, Randall, Hoeber, and Boys Group Realty makes it simple. Call Randall Hoeber at 306-782-1323 or email info@ralixenterprises.com to take the next step towards hands-free real estate investing. Your property, our expertise. Whether it's your home, business, or farm, Pioneer Solar and Renewables has you covered. As leaders in residential, commercial, and agriculture solar solutions, they make clean energy easy and affordable. Visit pioneersolarenergy.com or give them a call to begin harnessing the power of the sun today. Are you investing in real estate? Let Krishna with Boys Group Realty take care of everything. Finding properties, purchasing, renovations, leasing, and management, leaving you to focus on building wealth. Whether it's a single rental or an entire portfolio, serving Saskatoon and surrounding areas, helping maximize cash flows and minimize stress. If you're looking for an expert to manage your investments, reach out today, home@meetkrishna.ca.
Moving on to renovations, are there certain upgrades that tend to have a higher return that influences an appraisal value higher, Jordan?
So we've talked about this one a few times now, Ron. It's a question that comes up a lot, obviously. People are really interested in that. And the two words that appraisers like to use, that we use again and again, is it depends. You ask us any question, we'll usually just say it depends, because it depends on a lot of factors. But we chatted about this before. For example, one upgrade I see that generally brings like good value is building a garage, especially if you don't have a garage or if you've only got a single attached or a small garage or something like that. Garage is just, if you add a double detached in the back, you're going to get a lot of the value that it costs you to build that back, because buyers want that. They're desirable. That's a good improvement to your house, I guess, and generally. But also, if you had like a huge mansion with an 8-car attached garage, well, building a double detached garage then probably isn't going to change the value a whole lot. You've got a lot of garage already. It's kind of an over improvement to be adding more. So that's kind of the it depends part, and then that goes on to other factors in your home, like your kitchen. If your kitchen's 60 years old, you're probably going to get good value by renovating your kitchen because it's depreciated, it's out of style. The materials now are different. The functionality is different. We got soft closed doors. We got people use a lot more drawers than they do for kind of open cupboards, and they've just changed a lot in 60 years, obviously. And same with the materials for your sinks and appliances and everything. So if you've got a 60-year-old kitchen and you redo your kitchen, well, that's probably going to add a lot of value. But at the same time, it depends how you do it and kind of what the comparables support. So if you're in a neighborhood where, you've got a really nice $700,000 house and you put an IKEA kitchen, well, that might not bring as much value back, because everyone else in that neighborhood's putting in custom built cabinets because that's what everyone looks for in that, if you're in a $700,000, $800,000 house. But if you're in a $250,000 bungalow, maybe IKEA kitchen is what you should be doing. Yeah. And,
Mhm.
and so I guess the depreciation is the main thing. Like if you've got 60-year-old windows, they're at the end of their life. They're not really contributing to value anymore. They're leaky. If a buyer comes in, they don't want those leaky windows. They don't want the cost to replace windows because they know it's expensive. But because they're so depreciated, when you do those renovations, they give you a lot of value back. It's hard to say exactly what the value is. Generally, it's less than what it costs, but not always. Um, and yeah, I guess that's you can get an appraisal and directly ask that question. Hey, we do appraisals based on hypotheticals. Like, hey, if I put in this kitchen, here's my quotes, here's the layout, here's the materials. What would our value be at the end? And we can do that. But that's not very common.
So it sounds like it's not necessarily like, Ron, if you do a kitchen renovation, we're absolutely going to see this jump in the value of the home. It does sound more like if we do have things that are kind of old and should be replaced, there is a lot of value that can be added by replacing those things, whether it be a very outdated bathroom or kitchen or windows or roof, kind of bringing the property up to the standard of maybe what you're going to see on the top end of the market.
Yeah, I think the thing is like when you're putting in anything new, you're generally gonna add value unless the other thing was like brand new. Like you already had brand new windows and you just replaced them based on color. One thing I say a lot, like if you have a 5-year-old kitchen and you just don't like the color and you've got granite and you want quartz, you're not going to get a ton of value by redoing the kitchen just based on your personal tastes because you already had a nice kitchen for the market's tastes. Like a general buyer doesn't think that that's a bad kitchen, but you do. So that's not going to give you a lot of value. But yeah, you're kind of going from a value of zero, like you're not getting any value, to the most you can get is something that's fully depreciated, and that's not what buyers are looking for anymore. Or it's failing, like your shingles are failing and your roof is leaking, and it's actually a deterrent. So you're going to get the most value out of something like that.
Rock on. So we get an appraisal, it comes back, but the value is not what we were hoping for. Is there a way to challenge or appeal the appraised value? What happens when that comes across your plate, Jordan? When you put an appraisal forward and someone says, I actually think we missed out on 50 grand here. What is a good way of handling that from the other side of this?
Yeah, again, it depends, but let's say you're going through a lender. It really depends who the client is for the appraisal. So if you hired me directly, Ron, and you wanted to do an appraisal for, to find out what it's worth just for selling purposes, you're my client now. You asked me for the appraisal, you're going to pay for the appraisal. So you can ask me that question after, hey, why didn't you use these comparables? What is there anything you've missed or why did you do this? Could the value be any higher? But when you're doing it through a lender for a refinance or a purchase, the lender is the client. So they're the ones that can talk to me. I'm not allowed to answer questions from the homeowner directly or discuss the appraisal or the market value. That's just the client relationship. They don't want us to do that. So if you've got a problem with your value, you would be going to your lender or your mortgage broker. And they've usually got their own set process. I don't know what everyone is, but generally each bank or lender has some process for looking at the value or just revisiting the value. And so you would provide comparables or reasons that you thought were wrong or missed features or whatever it is that you think was incorrect. And yeah, the best thing you can do is to bring like good comparables forward, and an appraiser should have a list of the comparables they used and then the comparables they didn't use and the reasons why. And so likely we might have looked at your comparables already and said, you know what, those aren't relevant due to these reasons. But maybe we haven't, maybe we missed a comparable. So, if that's the case, I would definitely look at it and consider it. And, we're not perfect human beings. We make mistakes sometimes. So I've definitely done revised values once in a while. It's not super common, but so yeah, I guess you got to go through the channel of whatever channel you're in. So if you're working with ABC Bank, they've got their own channels. So you would request it with them, and they would come to us and say, "Hey, can you take a look at this?" And we take a look, and depending on the situation, we might revise it or might not.
And it sounds like a lot of that could be handled even in that homework stage, where if you were fairly concerned that it might not get to the value you were hoping for, make sure that you present a really strong option. The home is cleaned up. We can provide comparables, maybe even that detailed list that you're talking about that states what was done. And that's likely going to give you your best option. And then even kind of from the backtracking standpoint, that stuff could even be provided afterwards, just to say, hey, just wanted to make sure that we use this information, and then if it wasn't, maybe just that explanation probably sometimes is a great way for the communication to go smoothly.
Yeah, and we're not experts in every place in Saskatchewan, right? Like I've done appraisals all over Saskatchewan, and I'm not an expert. I believe I'm competent enough to do appraisals there, but a lot of times I'm calling realtors and asking about, certain neighborhoods or some towns just have bad foundations and stuff. So you don't know which blocks in the town, have foundation issues and stuff like that. So sometimes a homeowner, especially in a rural location, might know more about stuff like that I might have missed. That house sold for a lot less because everyone knew the basement wall was caving in. And that might not be totally evident for the appraiser. So there's always some knowledge that people can add, and some people are more of an expert in a certain location than we are, and we're happy to always get more information.
Amazing. Jordan, what's your advice to homeowners or investors who are planning ahead, say they're 6 to 12 months before a refinance or a listing, and want to position their property well for an appraisal? Are you giving them any other advice than what we've covered, or any other nuggets that you could provide for them?
Yeah, I think it's most of what we covered already. Just trying to keep it in a good, clean condition. If you're putting off some maintenance items, you might want to get them handled prior to the appraisal. Finishing up any existing projects and maybe not starting any brand new ones, so we're not midway through for the appraisal. But like there's not a whole ton that you're gonna, I wouldn't undertake something huge just for the appraisal. Do to your property what makes sense for you, and if it's an investment property, what makes sense for your investment, but not necessarily just to try and get the value as high as you can. Most of the appraisals going to be due to market forces and what's going on in the market, the demand for housing, and there's not a whole ton you can do personally in a short amount of time. So just kind of those few things.
Two last questions for you, Jordan. One, if someone wants to get an appraisal in Saskatchewan and they're like, Jordan sounds like a great guy, how could someone get in touch with you for completing an appraisal?
The Saskatchewan Realtors Association supports over 1,700 realtors across the province. Their members provide expert insights to help you navigate the market. Visit sra.ca for monthly stats, industry updates, and to find a realtor near you.
Yeah, my phone number is 306-290-7260. So if you're looking for a residential or commercial appraisal, we do agricultural, commercial, multifamily, kind of any sort of appraisal in Saskatchewan, we could help you out.
Awesome. Lastly, Jordan, if you had to choose a podcast, audiobook, or book, or movie, just pick one of those and tell me why you choose. And I'm looking for like a specific movie title or a specific book.
I really like Ben Felix's podcasts. Have you heard of him, Ron?
I haven't. Tell me more. Tell us why, Jordan.
I guess we're in the finance space here, and it's more of a personal finance podcast, but he's got some really good videos on like renting versus buying. And just like he does really deep dives onto the studies and information and kind of the modeling for stuff like that. And also just like investing. So if you're investing in ETFs, he just is really knowledgeable and does a really good job with it. And I think everyone could learn something about investing in finances from that. So that would be my recommendation, Ben Felix.
That's perfect. Thanks so much, Jordan. Thank you for coming on the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast today, sharing your knowledge. Appraisals do make up a really important part of the real estate transaction. So it's so great to hear from you about the things that you're seeing from the inside of the industry. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge today.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Ron.
Thanks for tuning in to the Saskatchewan Real Estate Podcast. Do you need help with your next real estate transaction? Whether you're buying your first home, refinancing, or investing in real estate, I am here to help you navigate the mortgage process in both Saskatchewan and Alberta, or connect you to a trusted professional. Feel free to send me an email at ron@ronqmortgage.ca or use the booking link to schedule a time to chat. Until next week, I'm Ron Quaroni, your Saskatchewan mortgage professional. Bye for now.